Hey guys, tonight we wake before dawn in the soft orange glow of embers, where you press your ears to the rhythmic clang of heavy hammers against bronze, imagining sparks like fireflies dancing in the humid air. You might think you've heard a better wake-up alarm, but trust me, you haven't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who's tuning in with me right now. Now, wind down and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're perched on a roughly hewn wooden stool just outside a low, thatched workshop on the outskirts of the walled city of Edo, what we now call Benin City, around the year 1550. The air tastes faintly of copper and smoke, and your eyelids still flutter as the first hammer strikes echo through the courtyard like a mellow heartbeat. This is when a 16th century Benin bronze caster's day truly begins. The master caster, his face lit by the molten glow, raises a glowing ingot of bronze, an alloy he forged from roughly 90% copper and 10% tin, and taps it twice on an anvil to test its malleability. Centuries later, archaeologists confirm that the Benin Kingdom's casters perfected those ratios, yielding bronze that resists cracking yet takes detail like no other metal. You can almost feel the satisfying snap in each precise tap, a mainstream historical fact tucked into every ring of metal. Between strikes, you notice the caster's apprentice sliding a small wooden box toward you. Inside lie strips of betel nut and tiny kernels of cola, an oddly earthy snack that keeps the apprentice's energy up through hours of work. And yes, they chew them like you might gnaw on chips during a movie. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some apprentices believe that chewing cola nut would let them hear the bronze's secrets, though whether the metal whispered back is left to your imagination. As the master swings his hammer, your thoughts wander to the birds waking in the nearby grove, parrots squawking overhead, mirroring the metallic chorus below. You feel the swing of each rhythmic blow in your chest, a hypnotic trance that turns metal shaping into something almost like a dance. The master occasionally hums a low tone, matching the hammer's cadence. You wonder if it's an old tuning ritual or just his way of passing the time. You lean forward, catching the glitter of sweat on his brow. The furnace behind him roars softly, breathing heat that makes your cheeks prickle. You want to remind yourself to breathe through your nose, but it's hard when you're distracted by the metallic aroma, a scent somewhere between charred almonds and fresh pennies. Over on a low shelf, you spy a faded clay plaque carved with the face of an early Oba. These plaques, historians still debate how exactly they were used. Were they purely decorative? Or did they hold protective powers for the palace walls? But their presence here anchors your senses in an ancient tradition. You're halfway convinced that if you reached out and touched one, you'd feel the weight of centuries pressing gently into your palm. A sudden squeak disrupts your reverie. A small, coal-black lizard scuttles across an overturned pot. Local lore claims these lizards are guardians of hidden bronze treasures, slipping through cracks to keep would-be thieves at bay. You half expect it to speak, offering clues to where the next hidden plaque lies. Instead, it vanishes under a pile of charcoal, and you blink, wondering if you imagine the whole thing. You notice the caster's hammer now leaves tiny flecks of molten metal in the air, dancing like fireflies that glow briefly before fading. Each fleck shifts in the gloom, catching what little dawn light slips through the eaves. Tiny galaxies suspended for a heartbeat. It feels almost spiritual, like each spark carries the voice of ancestors cheering on their craft. Your eyelids grow heavier, but you force them open to watch the apprentice pour a small ladle of molten bronze into a clay mold. The metal hisses as it hits the cool interior, sending up a brief plume of steam. You feel a bead of sweat trickle down your neck and wipe it away, trying to stay present in every single metallic hiss and sigh. It's a simple morning scene, really, just a master and his apprentice, molding metal with intention and care. Yet you can't shake the sensation that you're part of something grander, as if each hammer blow syncs with your own heartbeat. The world beyond these walls doesn't exist until the sun fully rises. Right now, it's just you, the forge, and that steady, sonorous rhythm. You fold your hands in your lap, breathing in the layered scent of hot metal, wood smoke, and early morning dew. The forge's glow dims slightly as the caster whispers an invocation, murmuring praises to the Orisha of fire, invoking blessings for a flawless pour. And you think to yourself, I could get used to this as my morning routine. Historians still puzzle over whether those whispered invocations were more practical prayers for heat control or deeply spiritual ceremonies. But you can almost feel both possibilities tingle through the air. You step closer as the master caster motions for you to witness the sacred alchemy of bronze creation. The morning light filters through gaps in the thatch roof, illuminating swirling motes of dust and metal in the air. You watch him lift a wooden paddle from a trough of molten copper, its surface rippling like liquid amber. He dips the paddle, and when he pulls it out, a thin film of glowing copper drips back into the crucible with a hiss that vibrates in your chest. You lean in, noticing the copper sheen, warm, reddish-orange, like the last embers of a campfire. The caster's apprentice approaches, carrying a small clay jar of tin ore, ground into fine white powder. You reach out a finger to trace the jar's worn rim, feeling the faint grime of countless hands. The apprentice tips the tin into the copper's molten pool in one smooth motion. The resulting swirl reminds you of cream mixing in coffee, except this latte would scorch your tongue in an instant. Historically, Benin casters mastered a blend of roughly 10 to 15% tin to copper, enough tin to harden the alloy without making it brittle, and enough copper to retain its warm glow once cooled. You've probably flipped a knife handle or two in your kitchen to notice that harder metals last longer, but here you're watching artisans hit that ideal balance in real time, centuries before modern metallurgy textbooks existed. The caster stirs the molten mixture with a long iron rod, the metal rippling around it like liquid glass. He murmurs a count, 1, 2, 3, and on the third swirl, he lifts the rod. Sparks rain down briefly, sizzling against the crucible's rim. You can almost taste the sulfurous tang as the metal breathes. Your nostrils flare. You realize you've been holding your breath, transfixed by the liquid glow. Just then, you recall the clay mold you saw yesterday in a dusty storeroom, the one carved into the shape of a warrior's face. If this alloy isn't perfectly homogeneous, that sculpture would crack as soon as the sun hits at midday. Mainstream fact: archaeometallurgists confirm that uneven mixing leads to microscopic fractures that only show up decades later in weathered plaques. In other words, this stirring ritual is literally a matter of centuries. You shift your weight and peer into a low metal basin filled with water and chiseled metal offcuts. The apprentice plucks a small drop of cooled alloy and hands it to you. It's surprisingly cool, like a sliver of river-worn stone, and you trace a fingertip along its edge. The fragment's tiny striations reveal swirling patterns, like marble carved by a restless river. You could swear you see the ghost of a face in those swirls, as if the metal itself holds memories. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some casters believe that adding trace amounts of elephant dung ash to the mix improved ductility. They'd burn the dung to ash, sieve it into a powder, and sprinkle it in, convinced the elephant's great strength would transfer to the bronze. You glance at the apprentice, who grins sheepishly. He won't admit whether it's a functional additive or just a confidence booster. Either way, it's a reminder that even the most precise science can carry a touch of folklore. You breathe out, and the caster taps the crucible with a wooden mallet, testing its resonance. The sound is a low hum, almost musical, vibrating through the floorboards. He nods, satisfied that the tin has dissolved properly, and calls for the ladle. When he dips it in, you brace yourself. The molten bronze glows so brightly that you have to squint. The ladle emerges, brimming like a small sun, and he tips it with a clean arc into a waiting mold. The metal slams into the cool clay with a thunderous crack. Steam rockets upward, coiling like ghostly serpents. You step back, feeling the heat wash over you in waves. It's loud enough to make your eardrums tickle, But there's no real danger. These casters have been performing this precise pour for generations without a single serious burn. In your city life, you burn toast weekly. These masters juggle molten metal like it's a morning latte. As the steam clears, you see the molten bronze settle into every tiny groove and recess of the mold. The caster jabs a thin rod into the surface, checking temperature and fluidity. His eyes glow violet in the reflected metal light, and you wonder if he sees invisible currents swirling beneath the surface. You imagine the Allah's atoms dancing, rearranging themselves into a lattice sturdy enough to survive wars and sunlight for centuries. You crouch beside a shallow trough of cold water, where finished pieces go for quenching. Today's pour is a small statuette of an oba's head, complete with crown and elaborate scarification marks. You lean forward to catch your reflection in the still water, only to find the mirrored image replaced by the statuette's solemn gaze staring back. It's uncanny, like looking into someone else's soul for a heartbeat. You jerk back, nearly tipping the basin. In the cool basin, the bronze hisses as it embraces the water, steam plumes rising in miniature geysers. The assistant lifts the piece and taps it gently on a wooden block. It rings clear and bright, like a temple bell greeting dawn. You feel that resonance deep in your bones and realize this is more than mere metalwork. It's music in a rigid form. You notice small flecks of gold dust mixed into the pouring channel. The apprentice leans in and whispers that some casters add gold dust as an offering to the spirit of the forge. If the spirit is appeased, so goes the belief, the next casting will flow flawlessly. You picture a mischievous spirit gathering gold particles to sweeten its mood, and you stifle a laugh at the thought of a tiny metal imp dancing in the flames. Once the piece cools, you pick it up carefully by the crown, feeling the weight and texture. The surface is buttery smooth, each scarification line crisp to the touch. You run your thumb along the lips, where the metal is thinnest, remembering how even slight alloy flaws would show up here as a hairline crack. Instead, you find perfection, a testament to that stirring ritual you watched. You stand and stretch your legs, the sleepiness from before melting away in the workshop's heat. The caster wipes his brow and offers you a sip from a gourd of palm wine, sweet and tangy, as a reward for your keen observation. You raise the gourd and clink it gently against his, a tiny celebratory toast in a world where each casting feels like a collective triumph. You lift the statuette to eye level, noticing the glow of early afternoon light accentuating its patina. The bronze shimmers between orange and green as shadows play across its contours. It seems alive for a moment, as if it might speak or blink. You hold your breath, half expecting a whisper about the Allah's hidden formulas, and you realize there's a magic here, born of chemistry, tradition, and a touch of superstition. You sink back onto your stool, palm wine warming your throat, and feel connected to every hand that has guided that metal through fire for centuries. You lean back against the rough-hewn beam as the caster pauses, raising his hammer aloft. The air shifts, the forge's heat meets a sudden hush. You feel anticipation coil in your chest, something is about to change. Then, in a voice low and sonorous, he begins to chant. It's not chanting like you've heard in movies, all theatrical echo. This is soft, almost whispered, but it resonates off the mud walls, bouncing back in warm echoes that tickle your ears. The words are in Edo, an ancient dialect you don't fully understand, but the cadence is clear, slow, deliberate, rising at the end of each phrase like a gentle question. You watch the apprentice mirror his posture, head bowed, feet planted. When the chant ends, the caster taps the hammer twice on the anvil, low then high, marking the chant's closing note. You lean forward, trying to catch the meaning. Some syllables feel familiar, names of ancestors, titles, even thank yous tucked inside the invocation. It's a mainstream historical fact that Benin casters often invoke the Orisha, or the spirits of past masters, before each major strike, calling upon their protection and skill in equal measure. The words dance around you like living things, stirring the humid air into a gentle vortex. There's a rhythm to it too, one chant for each mighty blow. You realize the hammer and chant are partners. The voice sets the pace. The hammer follows. The apprentice strikes once, then twice, then 3 times, each blow punctuated by a whispered syllable. You feel each strike in your spine, a warm tremor that spreads through your bones. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some casters believe that if one mispronounced a single sacred word, the bronze would crack in the mold, and they'd have to discard the entire batch. To prevent this, they sometimes had a chant checker, usually a young nephew, quietly standing by with a palm leaf scroll, ready to nudge the master if his memory slipped. You glance at a folded palm leaf tucked into the apprentice's belt, imagining a tiny cue sheet for secret spells. You notice the forge's glow pulse in time with the chant now, almost like it's breathing alongside their voices. Each time the caster draws a breath, the fire flickers. Each time he exhales, the light steadies. You wonder if it's actual magic, or just the clever venting holes in the hearth. Either way, it's mesmerizing. The master begins another round, a longer invocation, weaving together praises for the Oba's lineage, reminders of past triumphs, and humble requests for smooth casting. His words tumble over each other, urgent yet measured. You close your eyes and let the vibrations wash over you, feeling weightless and grounded at once. As the chant winds down, he lifts the hammer again, this time higher, trailing his voice into a final, reverent hum. You catch sight of sweat glistening on his forehead, and you realize the chanting requires just as much breath control as the hammer requires physical strength. The apprentice nods, then hammers in perfect sync, each strike landing precisely where it should. You can almost see faint outlines of glyphs shimmering around the caster's head, symbols of protection, fertility, perhaps even a playful nod to a particularly favored ancestor. Of course, these hovering glyphs are in your imagination, but they feel real, like a mirage you don't want to dispel. The rhythmic dance continues for several minutes, punctuated by occasional breaks when the caster murmurs a query, a question to the spirits, or maybe just a check on the alloy's temperature. You lean in and ask, quietly, what he's saying. He glances at you with a half smile and replies that some secrets are better left unspoken. You laugh softly, sensing he's teasing you. At one point, you notice a single metal scale, the size of a fingernail, caught on the edge of his hammer. The apprentice removes it with a delicate motion, rolling it between his fingers before dropping it into a little pouch. When you ask why, the master explains that these scales are offered to the ancestors after each casting. A token of respect and thanksgiving. It's a practice rooted in the belief that craftsmanship is a dialogue between the mortal and spiritual realms. You shift to admire the mixing table where a line of palm wine cups stands. The caster dips his finger into one, flicks a drop onto the anvil, and then begins a whispering chant that sounds like an attempt to coax more spirit into the metal. You realize that the offering of palm wine isn't just for the ancestors but for the metal itself, an affectionate gesture to keep the molten alloy happy. Mainstream historical sources note that casters incorporated ceremonies before every significant pour, blending workflow with ritual. It's why the workshops sometimes doubled as sacred spaces. Guarded not only by watchmen but by taboos, non-casters often had to wait outside until these rites concluded. You feel the tension build, like a drawn bowstring. Each hammer lift seems slower, heavier, more deliberate. Then the chant elongates a final vowel, stretching the silence until you're holding your breath. That's when the apprentice steps forward and tips a fresh ladle of molten metal into the mold. You watch as the bronze surges in, glowing red against the dark clay. The only sound is the metal hissing and the apprentice's soft exhale. No hammer strikes now, just the rain-stick whisper of molten bronze reaching every crevice. You realize the chant has guided this pour every bit as much as the hammered shaping did. When the mold is filled, the master stamps his foot twice and slaps the hammer one last time on the anvil, a signal the ritual has ended. He extends his hand toward you, palm up, and you place your hand in his. The warmth radiates through your skin, a final benediction. You straighten and notice the early afternoon sun has crept across the courtyard, painting golden streaks on the forge's blackened walls. The chanting has ended, but its echo lingers in your veins like a gentle hum. You step back, blinking into the bright light, carrying with you the rhythm of ancestral voices woven into each strike, a reminder that this work is as much prayer as it is metalwork. You follow the master caster beyond the workshop's dusty threshold and into the Oba's expansive court, where red earth pathways wind between low, ochre-painted buildings and relief-carved walls. The air here buzzes with the hum of court life, courtiers in coral beads whispering, heralds drumming announcements, and palace guards pacing like metronomes. You adjust your stride to match the steady tap of sandalwood clogs on the packed earth. A quick sideways glance shows the Oba seated beneath a canopy of royal blue cloth, his coral bead crown glinting in slanted sunlight. You catch his eye. For a moment, time stretches, and you feel that familiar flutter. The Oba's favor can shift in an instant. A herald's trumpet blast punctuates the hush, and the Oba beckons the master caster forward. You move with him, weaving through advisors and eunuchs carrying ornate fans. The court's scent, a blend of palm oil, incense, and polished wood, fills your nostrils. Mainstream historical accounts describe how Obas regularly commissioned new bronze plaques to celebrate conquests or mark jubilees, sometimes demanding dozens in rapid succession to reflect their ever-growing power. You know today's commission could shape the kingdom's story in bronze for centuries. As you approach, the Oba gestures to a large, blank clay panel propped against a timber frame. It's the template for today's bronze plaque, a sweeping scene of courtly life featuring warriors, musicians, and royal elephants. The clay's surface is smooth, awaiting the caster's interpretation in metal. You run a fingertip along its edge, feeling the cool dampness. The Oba lowers his voice to a measured murmur, issuing his whims. Let there be more elephants, elephants uncounted, standing tall as the sun rises. And the warriors must bear spears 3 cubits long, each tipped with the finest steel we trade across the sea. His tone is casual, but you sense the weight behind every syllable. He's sculpting not just a plaque, but a legend. A nearby scribe jots his words on palm leaf scrolls, the scratch of reed pen echoing. You watch the master caster nod, though you know nodding here is an art form, a blend of respect and subtle deference. If the caster's interpretation displeases the Oba, the next assignment might be a punishing construction project rather than a creative bronze commission. You step aside to let the caster examine the clay template. His experienced eyes trace the carved outlines, mentally translating each curve into molten metal. He points to the elephant's crowns, indicating they need extra detail. Tiny coral inlays around their tusks. Coral, you recall, was prized so highly that jars of it were sometimes considered more valuable than gold. Here's a quirky tidbit. Once, an Oba demanded a plaque depicting a hippopotamus playing a flute. Pure whimsy, he said, though no one had ever seen such a thing. The casters spent weeks debating whether to render it realistically or lean into the absurdity. Rumor has it they finally crafted a grinning hippo wearing a feathery hat. You chuckle, picturing the albeit unlikely scene on palace walls. The Oba's voice cuts through your daydream. Ensure the dancers wear anklets that jingle like the morning market. You nod along, imagining the soft tinkle of dozens of bronze anklets set into relief. Court musicians begin a soft drum rhythm, as if prompted by the Oba himself, and the caster murmurs measurements under his breath. You lean toward an ivory-clad advisor and ask about deadlines. He smirks. The Oba expects to display it by the next full moon, 4 weeks hence. Short time, but nothing the casters can't manage. 4 weeks to immortalize a grand scene in bronze? You think about your own to-do list back home. Replacing a light bulb feels monumental. The caster directs apprentices to fetch new slabs of fine-grained clay, noting today's piece will be over 4 square cubits. You watch them roll the clay out and smooth it with flat stones until its surface gleams like polished marble. The humidity causes clay to sag if left too long, so they work swiftly, each movement honed by years of repetition. Suddenly, a herald announces another twist. Let the plaque include the Oba's favored leopard. The court gasps. Leopards symbolize royal might, but carving their spots in clay would be painstaking. You observe the master squinting at the blank panel, weighing how to balance complexity with clarity. A coralline bead courtier leans over with a small tray of pigment powders, red ochre, charcoal, white kaolin, and gestures that the caster sketch the design in color before casting. You dip your fingers into a bit of ochre and daub a line on the clay. It smudges easily, reminding you how fleeting these pencil sketches will be once metal flows in. As the sketch takes shape, a majestic oba flanked by elephants and leopards with anklets jingling, you feel the energy shift. The court's tension transforms into creative excitement, each member invested in this moment. You can almost hear the bronze plaque whispering its story before it even exists. You step back to watch the master command his team. Apprentices roll smaller clay panels to cut out relief shapes, while others carve fine lines for feathers, fur, and facial expressions. The scene is alive under their skilled hands. The air thrums with possibility. You glance back at the Oba, who reclines, watching with a half smile as his vision takes form. You realize that every whim, every demand, shapes not just this plaque but the kingdom's memory. And you feel honored to witness the alchemy where royal desire meets artisan mastery. You straighten, brushing clay from your palms, and prepare to return to the workshop, where molten metal awaits to immortalize today's vision in burning bronze. You return to the workshop with dust still clinging to your robes, the Oba's words echoing in your ears like a drumline. The weight of the royal commission hangs in the air now, thick and hot. You glance around the courtyard and notice that even the goats are quieter than usual, as if sensing the pressure. The master caster doesn't speak. He just walks to the central work table and places a hand flat on its surface, firm, steady, deliberate. That's the signal. Apprentices scatter like pebbles on a drum, each off to fetch tools, adjust the molds, prepare the wax. There's a kind of choreography to it, a low-stakes frenzy that hums with purpose. You pull your sleeves up. You're not really going to help, but you want to look like you might. Now it's time for the wax modeling. The master's fingers, still dusted in red clay from the court sketch, move quickly, shaping soft wax into thin coils and pressing them onto the plaque's base. You crouch beside him, watching as he lays down the first line, the curve of a tusk, smooth and rising. He doesn't look up. The wax must sing before it sets, he mutters. You nod, pretending that made perfect sense. Here's your mainstream historical anchor. The lost wax method used in Benin, called serene, was so advanced that when Portuguese traders first saw it in the 16th century, they assumed it must be imported from Europe. It wasn't. It was homegrown brilliance. The wax model formed the core of the entire casting process, a fragile sculpture that would vanish in flame but leave its perfect ghost in bronze. You try rolling a bit of wax between your fingers, and it squeaks slightly, sticking to your skin. It's warm and pliable, but not too soft. Someone had clearly judged the beeswax to resin ratio just right. That's important. Too soft, and it melts under your fingers. Too hard, and it cracks during detail work. You resist the urge to chew it like gum. You're startled by a sharp click, an apprentice snapping a hair-thin wax thread. He threads it along the edge of a miniature leopard's spot, then melts the tip with a coal-heated needle to bind it down. You're watching bronze in its embryonic phase. It's oddly tender. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some casters swore by rubbing a tiny bit of crushed cola nut on their fingertips before wax modeling, claiming it steadied their hands. Others used incantations or even sang softly to their tools to coax cooperative behavior out of the wax. You glance at one apprentice, lips moving as he shapes a lion's mane, and wonder if he's singing or swearing at it. The workshop now smells like wax and wood smoke, mixed with something faintly sweet, maybe palm oil rubbed into the bench legs to keep the termites at bay. The master points to the newly laid elephant tusks and gestures for more definition in the curve. An apprentice quickly fetches a razor-shell knife, its edge worn but still sharp. He scrapes delicate grooves into the wax, mimicking ivory striations. From a distance, it looks like real bone. You watch a young boy carry in a tray of tiny wax anklets, perfect miniature replicas of the real things, complete with tiny ball-jingle decorations. For the dancers, he says proudly. You compliment his craftsmanship, and he glows like he's just been knighted. There's debate now about the positioning of the leopard. Should it crouch at the oba's feet or stride across the lower register of the plaque? The master and two senior apprentices argue softly, sketching options in clay beside the model. You overhear one say, historians still argue about the symbolism of leopards, royal authority or spiritual guardians? And you smile. Even here, mid-project, they're already aware they're creating something scholars will squabble over for centuries. Eventually, the decision is made. The leopard shall leap. Not crouch, not stroll, leap. It's more dynamic, the master says. More fitting for a king who's still expanding his domain. You nod as if you'd come to the same conclusion. The wax modeling continues late into the afternoon, with the shapes growing more elaborate by the hour. Tiny wax drums are shaped, and their surface is textured to suggest hide. Musicians' cheeks are puffed mid-song, their expressions captured with surprising emotion. Even the oba's coral bead crown is modeled bead by bead in wax, a time-consuming process the apprentices undertake without complaint. A soft breeze picks up through the courtyard. Someone has started humming, low, breathy, rhythmic. You recognize the melody from the forge's chants. It's not a chant for casting. It's a tune for focus, for clarity. The humming passes from one apprentice to the next until the whole courtyard vibrates with it like a quiet swarm of bees. You find yourself swaying slightly. As the wax detailing winds down, the plaques are gently lifted onto banana leaves and carried into the mold hut. You follow, careful not to trip on the uneven ground. The hut is cool, shaded, and smells like ash and damp clay. There, the team begins layering clay over the wax models. It must be done gently, in stages, thin clay first, then thicker layers to build strength. Each layer is smoothed with a wet palm and pressed carefully to avoid crushing the fragile wax beneath. You help pat down a layer on the corner, and the cool, slick clay squishes between your fingers like bread dough. They'll let the molds dry now, and then they'll bake them. The heat will melt the wax out through vents, leaving only empty chambers ready for bronze. You stand beside the master, hands muddy, as he surveys the row of encased plaques. He places one hand lightly on your shoulder and says, "Now they sleep. When they wake, they'll shine." And you believe him. The morning begins with a low, breathy whoosh, the sound of the forge coming alive again. You're back in the casting courtyard, and the air already trembles with heat, like reality itself is slightly warped. Ash clings to everything, even your eyelashes, and the sky above wears that pale orange hue that tells you today is going to be a scorcher. The wax models, now encased in their clay cocoons, are neatly arranged in rows, looking like sleeping tortoises waiting to hatch. But you know what's really inside: miniature warriors, dancing women, charging leopards, and that arrogant elephant whose tusks you spent half an hour smoothing out in wax. The apprentices are checking the mold seams for cracks. One boy tilts a pot of water gently onto the clay surface, watching how it absorbs. Too fast? Still too porous. Too slow? Maybe too thick. You squint over his shoulder like you understand. You don't. But it's mesmerizing, like watching someone read tea leaves in reverse. Meanwhile, the master is prepping the forge. This thing looks like a giant termite mound that grew teeth. It's all curves and spouts and open maws. You notice the tuyers, those clay nozzles through which the bellows will blast air, have been freshly replaced. You remember someone saying those crack after every major casting and need to be reshaped by hand. Kind of like how your phone charger breaks every 3 weeks but less mass-produced. Here's your mainstream history beat. In the height of the Benin casting period, artisans developed multi-chambered forges capable of reaching temperatures over 1,100 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt bronze and hot enough to give you an instant sunburn just by standing too close. You take a step back. A pair of apprentices begin stoking the forge with charcoal, while another team wrestles with the great bellows. 2 massive goatskin sacks connected to wooden foot pedals. The motion is part dance, part punishment. Pump. Inhale. Whoosh. Exhale. You feel the wind on your face as the first blast of heat surges upward, licking at the sky. And now the bronze. Shiny, jagged lumps carried in wide clay bowls. You spot tin and copper mixed in strange proportions, some gleaming like fire, others dull and matte. This batch came from a Portuguese ship, someone says. We traded ivory for it. You raise your eyebrows. Must have been good ivory. Here's a little oddball tidbit for you. Some casters believe that bronze cast from ingots blessed under moonlight produced better sound when struck. Not a better shape, mind you, just a more pleasing ring. So before certain ceremonial castings, they'd lay the ingots out under a full moon and chant into the night like metallurgical sirens. The master points to a trio of apprentices who begin melting the bronze in crucibles, thick, rounded pots blackened by years of use. The metal starts to shift inside, changing from clunky chunks into swirling lava. You peer over the edge just in time to catch a swirl of copper-gold liquid rolling over like the surface of the sun. You feel a knot in your gut. It's not fear, exactly. Just, because once they pour, there's no going back. No Control Z. No. Oops, let me fix that. Once the metal flows into the mold, it's committed. And that wax sculpture you worked so delicately on yesterday? It'll be gone. Burned out. Replaced by its bronze ghost. You step back as the casting begins. The first mold is propped upright, with its little spout facing skyward. 2 apprentices grab the crucible with iron tongs the size of your arm. They wobble slightly, it's heavy, but steady themselves. Then the master steps in to guide the pour. The bronze flows like honey with a bad attitude, thick, gleaming, angry hot. It hisses as it hits the clay's throat, and steam curls up in ghostly spirals. You hold your breath. Everyone does. You can feel the silence settle over the workshop like a blanket. No one speaks. Even the goats outside seem to pause mid-chew. Then it's done. The crucible is empty, and the mold drinks in the heat. There's a strange satisfaction watching it, like feeding fire to a sculpture. And it's not just one mold. It's a chain reaction. One by one, the bronze pours into the others, filling their wax-shaped hollows with molten memory. You catch sight of one apprentice with a small gourd in his hands. He dips his fingers into it and dabs something onto his neck. Palm wine, he says with a grin. Keeps the fire spirits happy. You nod solemnly. If you were pouring liquid metal from 1,000 degrees into fragile clay, you'd probably want a little divine insurance too. Soon the courtyard is filled with the faint sizzle of cooling molds and the sharper smell of scorched clay. You know what's happening inside. The wax is gone now, completely vaporized, leaving only a hollow void filled with cooled bronze. The Oba's dancers, elephants, and leopards are no longer dreams. They're metal now, waiting for their birth cry. The master checks each mold with the back of his knuckles, feeling for vibration and heat. One of them whistles slightly, releasing a soft puff of steam from a hidden vent. He nods. That's a good one, he murmurs, mostly to himself. And then comes the wait. The cooling. Hours of it. The bronzes need to sleep in their shells, just like he said. Disturb them too early and the metal will crack, warp, collapse in on itself like a bitter memory. So you wait. The team settles into low conversation, cracking cola nuts and telling stories. One apprentice starts to hum again, same tune as yesterday. A rhythmic, looping sound. You hum along now without realizing. You think of that waxed leopard, now locked in bronze, mid-leap. You think of the oba's dancers, their anklets frozen in eternal jingle. And you realize this moment, this breathless pause between fire and form, is its own kind of ritual. Not quite creation. Not quite reflection. Just a warm, humming silence that lives between the hammer and the echo. There's a silence in the workshop the next morning, not sleepy, but reverent. The molds lie still, like ancient relics pulled from a tomb. You can feel the anticipation crawling along your arms. Today is the day they open. Today, the bronze wakes. You step into the courtyard just as the first mold is cracked. The clay breaks away with a soft, hollow thump, like stale bread crust. An apprentice taps gently with a wooden mallet, then peels off a section to reveal a gleaming surface beneath. Dim, yes, still coated in ash, but unmistakably metal. The leopard's paw emerges first, frozen mid-swipe, its claws elegantly exaggerated. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. It made it. It survived. One by one, the other molds follow. Clay splits and crumbles. Ash lifts into lazy spirals. Bronze peeks out like buried treasure. The oba's face comes into view, his features serene, impossibly smooth. You lean in. It's uncanny. The coral beads drape across his chest in perfect curves. Even his eyelids carry the slight downward tilt that suggests wisdom. Or maybe just a very long day of managing court politics. Mainstream history note: by the 16th century, Benin bronzes were already admired for their unparalleled detail and durability. European visitors described them as wondrous works and couldn't believe such refined metalwork came from what they viewed as a primitive kingdom. Joke's on them. Benin's artistry ran circles around theirs, and your hands were just part of that magic. The smell in the air is something new, a mix of wet clay, scorched wax, and sharp metal. It tingles your nose, like the scent of rain on hot earth. One of the apprentices brings over a large calabash of water, and with practiced ease, splashes it over a freshly freed plaque. The hiss is immediate. You jump. Everyone else stays calm. Quenching, someone mutters. Seals the grain. They move to cleaning now. Brushes made from raffia fibers scrub the surfaces, revealing the warm reddish sheen of true bronze beneath the soot. You get handed a rag and a task: clean the anklets. The tiny bronze rings clink softly as you polish them. It's weirdly calming. You fall into a rhythm: wipe, turn, polish, admire, repeat. Next to you, a pair of apprentices argue about whether the dancer's elbow is too sharp. It's not sharp, the elder says, it's expressive. You nod sagely. Sharp elbows can be expressive, especially when you're dancing for a king. Then comes the filing. Any excess bronze from the casting, those wiry little threads from bent holes or poor channels, has to be cut and smoothed. It's delicate work. One slip and you could scratch a dancer's eye clean off. You let someone else handle that. You're brave, not reckless. Now for the quirky bit. One bronze caster swears that if you polish a plaque under sunlight rather than shade, it sings louder. He insists each piece has its own tone when tapped, and direct sun enhances it. You smile, watching him carefully angle a plaque toward the sun, then tap it lightly with a stick. A faint ping. He grins like he just discovered bronze jazz. As midday stretches across the sky, the master walks from plaque to plaque, inspecting. He doesn't rush. His fingertips trace each figure like he's reading a story carved into metal. When he reaches the elephant, he pauses. You stand beside him. He looks down at the arched tusks, nods once, and simply says, "Good." That's it. No speech. Just good. You've never been more proud. Suddenly, there's a mild panic. One plaque, meant to show a drummer beside the oboe, has a visible crack down its edge. A hairline fracture, but enough to cause worry. Everyone huddles around. The master crouches, stares at it, then lifts it carefully. "We keep it," he says. A cracked voice still sings. "And that's that. No waste. Flaws don't cancel legacy." You sit under the shade of a fig tree while others finish buffing and polishing. Your fingers are raw from the cloth. Your clothes are streaked with soot. But you're not leaving. Not until you see the lineup. Because now it's time for arrangement. The plaques are laid out side by side on low benches, as they might appear in the Oba's palace. Rows of dancers, leopards, warriors, servants. Your eye catches the one with the swooping dancer, her legs caught in mid-twirl, and you remember shaping that waxed ankle yourself. You grin. She's flying. Here's where it gets interesting. These bronze plaques weren't just decoration. They were historical record. Preceding written archives, they told stories of wars, royal births, festivals, and treaties. A bronze comic strip for royalty. Some historians still debate whether certain plaques represented literal events or symbolic myths. But either way, the message was clear. The Oba's world was magnificent, and you were part of preserving it. An apprentice nudges you. "See this one?" he whispers, pointing to a plaque of a man holding a severed head. "That's supposed to be the Oba's uncle." You raise your brows. "Seriously?" He shrugs. "That's the story. Disrespected the king. Boom. Immortalized." You try not to smirk. Bronze, the ultimate passive-aggressive art form. Evening descends slowly, and with it comes the final ritual, the burnishing. The master takes a stone, flat, dark, smooth from years of use, and rubs it across the surface of each plaque in circular motions. The bronze starts to glow, like fire remembered. You realize something strange. It's no longer just metal. It's breath. It's music. It's story. You ask the master if every casting day ends like this. He looks at you, faint smile tugging his lips. "If we're lucky," he says. "Some days, it's all cracks and noise. But when it works..." He trails off, gesturing to the gleaming row of plaques. This. The final light of day catches the edge of the Oba's coral bead crown, making it gleam like fresh blood orange. You take a step back. The whole lineup is there now, silent, shining, unblinking, and in the quiet, just before the stars wake, you hear it. Not sound exactly, but something like it. A hum. A memory. A whisper of fire and metal. The bronzes are finished now, at least, finished enough to breathe on their own. You watch the courtyard fall into its slower rhythm. Tools are set aside, brushes rinsed out in gourd bowls, ashes swept into careful piles like powdered history. But your master isn't done with you yet. As twilight cloaks the rooftops and paints the clay walls lavender blue, he nods toward the edge of the compound. "We go," he says. "That's all. Just we go." And of course, you follow. The path out of the foundry snakes past the dye pits, where indigo cloths sway like sleepy ghosts in the breeze. You pass the palm grove, the trees murmuring secrets with their long fronds, and then the beating sound of a drum, somewhere far off, carries you the rest of the way. The master is taking you to another compound. Not a forge this time. Something quieter, older, more hidden. You duck under a low arch and emerge into a space that smells of oil, beeswax, and something herbal. Inside, you see what can only be described as metal dreams. Shelves line the walls, stacked with older bronzes. Some look familiar, faces of Obus long past. Others are stranger, abstract spirals, snake-like staffs, twisted bells that seem to hum when you pass. The air is thick, charged with a presence that makes the hairs on your arms twitch. You're in the family shrine. Or at least one of them. Your master gestures for you to sit. He doesn't speak right away. Just lets you soak it in. The bronzes here aren't for show, and they're certainly not for trade. They're private, ceremonial, sacred. Here's your mainstream moment. Benin casters didn't just make bronzes for royal decoration. They also crafted ancestral heads and totems used in private spiritual rituals, honoring the dead and communicating with unseen forces. These weren't just art, they were links in a spiritual chain. And now, you're staring right at them. One figure in particular catches your eye. A heavy bronze head with a crown of raised rosettes, its eyes wide and unblinking. Your master sees you looking and explains, "That's my father's father. He taught me to cast when I was your age." You nod solemnly. Somehow it doesn't feel weird to be introduced to someone who's been dead longer than you've been alive. Now the quirky. There's a small bronze tortoise sitting by a jar, and your master tells you it's not just for show, it's a listening charm. "When I was young, we were told not to speak secrets near it." The tortoise remembers. You half laugh, but still find yourself lowering your voice, just in case. He walks you through the room, showing you how some of the figures are offered libations, palm oil, palm wine, even the odd cracked egg. It's not superstition, he says. It's continuity. Just as wax leaves a hollow for bronze, the dead leave a space for memory. And those memories are cared for, polished, and spoken to like any other living thing. As you sit, he tells you stories. The time a sculptor dreamed of a snake coiled around his tools and woke to find a python in his hut. The casting that failed 3 times until the caster apologized at his father's grave. The bronze plaque that arrived at court with a flaw, only for the oba to smile and say it showed the gods had a sense of humor. These aren't in any history book. They're not scratched into plaques or whispered in court. But they live here, in this quiet metal museum of family and fire. You realize that casting isn't just a job. It's a bloodline. After some time, your master lifts a thin stick of incense and lights it. A soft tendril of smoke drifts upward and curls around the nose of a bronze leopard nearby. You feel like something ancient is stirring, gently, lazily, the way a cat stretches after a nap. And then, softly, your master begins a chant. It's not loud. It's not melodic. Just rhythmic syllables, repeated like footsteps. You don't know the words. You don't need to. The bronzes know. You sit in silence as the incense burns down and shadows lengthen across the floor. Time moves strangely in the shrine. You can't tell if you've been here an hour or a lifetime. You start to feel floaty, untethered. Like a little wax figure about to melt and take a new shape. Outside, the moon has risen. Not full, but bright enough to cast pale silver over the courtyard stones. Your master offers you a final word before you go. Remember the heat, yes. But also remember the hush. You nod. Somehow. You know exactly what he means. As you step back out into the night, something lingers behind your ribs. It's not fear, not even awe. It's gravity. Like you've been handed something heavy but precious. Something that buzzes quietly in your chest, waiting to be poured out in fire. You walk back toward the forge with slower steps. The air is cooler now. The stars blink lazily above you. You can still feel the shrine smoke in your clothes, the bronze faces watching you even with your back turned. You're not just an apprentice anymore. Not really. You've seen the metal ghosts, heard the silence between the casts, listened to the tortoise, and now you carry it with you. That echo of something ancient. Something still molten. Something waiting. By morning, you've returned to the more familiar tempo of life in the casting compound. Clay dust in your lashes, ash in your cuffs. The same chicken refusing to respect personal space. The spiritual gravity of the shrine is still with you, humming quietly under your skin, but today brings a more tactile task. You're going to help install the bronzes in the palace. This is no small thing. These plaques and figures don't just get nailed to walls like market posters. Each piece must be positioned with intention, aligned with others in meaning and material and political message. You're effectively curating bronze sentences in a royal language. The cart arrives early, pulled by 2 donkeys and guided by a grizzled handler who smells of fermented cassava and knows how to balance art like a circus juggler. You load the bronzes under thick woven cloths. They clink gently against each other, like a secret chorus. The trip to the Oba's palace winds through Benin's central avenues. You pass spice stalls, gourd merchants, children playing mancala in the dust. The city hums with patterns, basket weavers' songs, distant drumbeats, and the constant, almost mechanical shuffle of sandals on earth. Mainstream historians note that by the 16th century, Benin's city was a marvel of urban planning. It had broad, clean streets and organized districts long before many European cities learned to spell sewage. Portuguese visitors were stunned by its complexity and grandeur, and some rode home comparing its walls to those of great classical cities. And here you are, bronze in hand, heading straight to its glowing heart. You reach the inner palace, its carved wooden gates flanked by watchful guards in red sashes. The palace smells of camwood, sweat, palm oil, and something older, maybe the breath of thousands of ceremonies. Inside, the steward leads your group toward the Western Hall, where a whole new corridor is being dedicated to recent events. A victory over a neighboring kingdom. A rare celestial alignment. A royal marriage that went surprisingly smoothly. The bronzes will tell these stories. But not loudly. Never loudly. They whisper them in metal. Leopard paws placed in a crouch to show stealth. A warrior's head slightly turned to suggest hesitation before attack. Even a small bird perched on a shoulder to signify peace negotiated after bloodshed. The palace's bronze curator, a wiry man with permanent squint lines and fingers smudged with polish, takes over. He starts assigning placements like a conductor lining up an orchestra. Oba with twin sons, left of choral bead envoy. Drummer goes third. No, fourth. Dancer stays, but slide her 3 fingers lower. You don't argue. You just move, hold, adjust, step back. You're told to polish the Oba's plaque one last time before mounting. You approach it with cloth in hand, but it's like touching a heartbeat. The bronze is cool yet alive. You make slow circles across the surface until his eyes gleam, not too bright, just enough to reflect power. A ladder is brought in, and under supervision you're allowed, yes, allowed, to carry the plaque up for mounting. Your hands shake slightly. You plant each foot carefully, heart thudding with the rhythm of a forging drum. One misstep and you'd crash through history, but you don't misstep. You mount the plaque flush with the carved wooden frame, and the clamps slide in with a gentle click. You step down. No applause, but the curator gives you a subtle nod. It's enough. Time for the quirky tidbit. One of the bronzes includes a depiction of a royal cat. Not a leopard. A domestic cat. It's seated politely beside a servant's foot, and someone in the palace murmurs that it represents a cat that once interrupted a royal meeting by batting a bead necklace off the table. The Oba apparently laughed so hard that it became legend. Now it lives forever in bronze, right next to war heroes and sacred dancers. You consider this and decide the cat probably deserves it. As more bronzes are installed, the room slowly transforms. It's like watching silence become music, brick by brick. The once bare walls now glow with stories. A corridor becomes a timeline, a memory palace in literal form. Each piece is spaced just so. Not too close. Not too far. They need breathing room, these metal voices. They need to echo, not overlap. The curator keeps adjusting until the rhythm is perfect. And then, finally, the Oba himself enters. Everything freezes. Well, everyone freezes. The room holds its breath. He's tall, more than you expected, draped in coral regalia that catches the light like scattered embers. His steps are slow, heavy with ritual. He says nothing. Just walks the corridor. You watch his eyes flick across each bronze. His face remains unreadable, and for a terrifying second you think maybe he's unimpressed. Maybe the metal didn't sing loud enough, but then he stops. He turns to your dancer plaque, the one you helped shape from wax to flame. He leans in. One hand rises, and he smiles. Just a little. The curator exhales like he's been holding it for a week. The oba nods once, and the room relaxes. He leaves without a word. He doesn't need to speak. The bronze has spoken for him. The plaques are in place now, but you stay behind for a moment. You walk slowly down the corridor, letting your fingers hover near the bronzes, not quite touching. It's like walking through memories you haven't lived, yet somehow remember. As you exit into the afternoon heat, the palace walls rising tall around you, you realize this. Every caster, every apprentice, every whisper of fire and ash, it's all here now, hidden in plain sight. The metal holds it. The walls breathe it. And for the first time, you feel like your hands belong to something much, much bigger. You return to the foundry compound in a kind of quiet daze. The dust of the city clings to your feet, but your mind still floats somewhere between the polished palace corridor and the bronze dancer's faint smile. The others can tell something has shifted in you. They see it in how you move now, more deliberate, more weight in each step, like your bones remember the ladder and the oba's quiet nod. But there's little time for reflection. The master calls you over with a grunt and tosses a bundle of palm fronds at your chest. The gods want clean feet, he mutters, and points toward the family altar. Today is for ritual. Not ceremony, not pomp. Ritual. The slow, ordinary kind that happens in courtyards and kitchens and small, sun-drenched corners of daily life. You'll help prepare the compound's spiritual space, and maybe, if you're quiet enough, you'll get to see a side of casting that even many apprentices never do. You sweep the ground with the palm fronds until it's bare and smooth, as if wiping the world's chalkboard clean. A clay pot of water, infused with bitter herbs and charcoal, is placed at the foot of the shrine. Your master dips his fingers in and splashes it onto the ground in a tight circle. Protection, cleansing, memory, all bound up in one simple splash. Mainstream historians know the Edo people of Benin held deeply layered spiritual beliefs, with shrines playing a central role in everyday life. These weren't separate from work, they were fused into it. Casters especially lived at a spiritual intersection. They dealt with fire, transformation, and ancestral memory on a daily basis. In fact, some historians still debate how much of their casting practice was technical knowledge versus inherited ritual. You sit cross-legged near the altar now, polishing a smaller ancestral bronze, not for show, but for communion. Your master kneels beside you and opens a calabash. Inside, chalk, a folded cloth, a piece of kola nut, and a small ivory charm shaped like a curled snake. You remember the snake? He asks, and you nod. How could you forget the shrine story? Well, this one's quieter, he says. Watches the cracks. Listens through stone. He places it gently on the shrine. He begins to hum. It's not a song you know. But you hum along anyway, letting your voice match his like blending waxes before the pour. The bronze head on the altar seems to hum back, a low, steady vibration under your ribs. Time for your quirky surprise. Someone behind you lights a bundle of herbs, and the smoke that drifts into the air smells, strangely like roasted yams. You blink, confused, but your master chuckles. Our ancestor liked yams more than people, he says. If he doesn't smell them, he won't show up. You half laugh, half choke on the smoke, but it works. The shrine feels different now. Warm. Familiar. As the ritual ends, the master claps once, sharply, and the sound seems to slice the air clean in two. The smoke drifts lazily around your shoulders, like tired arms hugging you goodbye. You don't speak. You just sit in the warmth for a moment, the bronze still gleaming faintly in the early light. Later, you join the others for a meal. Today it's yam pottage and smoked fish, with a chunk of breadfruit that looks slightly suspect but tastes like buttery clouds. Someone passes around a carved gourd of palm wine. and the jokes start flowing faster than the drink. One of the older apprentices tells a story about a caster who fell asleep during a spirit offering, only to wake with his beard tied in 7 tiny braids by an invisible hand. You snort. Someone else insists that once, a bronze head opened its mouth and sighed when a child dropped a mango in front of it. It was tired of yams. The boy shouts, and the courtyard erupts in laughter. But beneath the laughter, something simmers. That same feeling you had in the shrine, a hum, a shared breath. The fire might be out for the day, but the casting never really stops. You wander into the shed where tools are stored. Rows of chisels, scrapers, and bellows sleep in their racks like retired dancers. You pick up one of the older mallets, its handle smooth with decades of palms. And you wonder, how many hands have held this exact shape before yours? Historians still argue whether this kind of skill can be fully taught, or if some of it simply seeps into you through repetition and reverence. Is it muscle memory, or is it spiritual inheritance? Does the wax learn from the hand, or does the hand learn from the wax? You don't have an answer. But when you hold the mallet, you feel less like you're holding a tool and more like you're being held by something, steady, weighty, warm. As the sun sets, a light rain begins to tap on the roof. You sit under the eaves, watching water bead along the edges of clay pots. The smell of wet earth mixes with the faint tang of bronze filings and roasted yam smoke still clinging to your tunic. It's oddly comforting. You remember something your master once said, a bronze remembers everything. Fire, fear, the shape of your breath. Even what you forgot to say. You're beginning to understand that now. You hum softly to yourself. Not the ritual chant. Just a low, steady note. The rhythm of a fire that doesn't go out just because no one sees the flame. The following morning, the world feels a little softer, like the rain has polished every surface of the city while you slept. You step outside to find the courtyard shining with puddles, and the air hums with that deep, green scent of wet leaves and wood smoke. The chickens are grumpier than usual. Probably hate the damp. You stretch your arms overhead and hear the familiar chorus of the foundry awakening. Metal clinks. A forge groans. Someone's already complaining about a missing chisel, which is funny because it's right there behind his ear. You point silently. He grunts in gratitude. Today's task feels simple, but it's deceptive. You're carving new casting molds from clay and charcoal ash, basic. Slow work that demands attention and patience. You've learned the shape of mistakes by now. A shallow impression leads to flat features. Too deep, and noses melt off like candle wax. You settle beside the master, who's sculpting a mold for a royal drummer, his fingers dancing over the clay with an ease that still stuns you. No grand ceremony here, just a steady, meditative scrape of tool on earth. The details he coaxes out are uncanny. A thumb's pressure becomes a frown line. A looped wire pressed gently into the cheek creates a shadow dimple. Mainstream historians widely acknowledge that these molds were not simple duplicates or production pieces. Each one was custom built. Hand sculpted anew for every single bronze. That meant no mass production, no shortcuts, no Control-C, Control-V centuries before computers would ruin attention spans forever. In Benin, even repetition was an act of artistry. Across from you, 2 younger apprentices are muttering under their breath, trying to copy a particularly tricky motif, the folded leaf emblem of a respected general. They get it wrong, again. The folds don't mirror properly. Your master leans over without looking and says the leaf doesn't lie flat. It listens, whatever that means. But somehow it helps. They get it right on the next try. There's something soothing about this work. No fire. No molten bronze threatening your eyebrows. Just you, clay, and breath. Your palms move in circles. Your thumb smooths the ridges. Your focus narrows into something not unlike prayer. And here comes today's oddball delight. Someone finds a small smooth stone embedded in a batch of old clay. But this isn't just any pebble, it's got a tiny, ancient groove along one side. One of the senior casters insists it's a talking stone, used in rituals to carry messages to the ancestors. Another says it's just a lazy chisel mark. They argue for half an hour while you quietly pocket the stone. It hums in your palm like it agrees with both of them. As the day warms, you're asked to take a completed mold and begin the drying process. It's a dance of timing and patience. Too fast, and the clay cracks. Too slow, and the inner wax can't melt properly. You sit it in the sun's edge, rotating it like a chicken on a spit. It's hypnotic. You could swear the mold is breathing. Lunch is a brief affair, boiled plantains with spiced oil, eaten on the steps while you watch lizards do push-ups on the wall. One of them stares directly into your soul. You blink first. The master calls you over again, not for scolding this time, but to show you something. He opens a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside is a fragment of a very old bronze plaque. The patina is deep green, cracked like old paint, and the figure carved into it is barely visible, just the outline of a face, wide eyes, and a single coral bead resting on the forehead. This broke before your father was born, he says. It was meant to honor a queen, but the alloy didn't take. He runs a thumb along the broken edge. We kept it though. You don't throw away a breath just because it wasn't perfect. You study the piece. It's haunting, half-finished. And somehow more human because of it. Later, you return to the molds. You've started carving a detail no one asked for. A small bird perched on a branch, tucked into the corner of a new plaque. It's your own signature, subtle and secret. Not defiance, exactly. More like participation. The mold doesn't mind, and just like that, you realize you're not just copying anymore. You're composing. You're no longer mimicking the master's touch. You're developing your own rhythm, like a drummer finding the beat after years of echoing someone else's. The sun dips low again, gilding the rooftops with amber light. Your clay-stained fingers ache in that pleasant, satisfied way that tells you you've spent your time well. A soft breeze slips through the compound, fluttering the drying leaves tied above the entrance. They rustle like applause. You bow theatrically, just for fun. Before bed, you take one last look at your mold. The bird is still there, proud and quiet. Tomorrow, it'll be sealed. Then burned out. Then filled with metal. But tonight, it's just clay and potential. And maybe that's enough. You wake to the sound of pounding again, but not drums this time. No rhythm or pattern, just the thick, stubborn thud of someone kneading wax. It's a sound you've come to respect, and also fear, because it means today is wax modeling day. And that means perfection. Or something close to it. You shuffle out, rubbing sleep from your eyes. The compound already smells of palm oil, warm wax, and damp clay. The fire hasn't been lit yet, but the mood feels combustible. There's an energy in the air, like everyone knows they're on the edge of something. Big? Beautiful? Dangerous? It doesn't matter. The wax won't wait. Your task is delicate, shaping softened beeswax into detailed forms that will become the internal model of a bronze figure. Every fold, every line you press into it will be mirrored in metal, immortalized. No do-overs. The phrase waxing poetic now makes a lot more sense to you. You pinch and pull, your hands slick with oil to keep the wax pliable. The sun hasn't yet cleared the tree line, and already sweat beads at your brow. It's not just the heat, it's the pressure. The wax feels like it's watching you, waiting to see what shape you'll give it. You're sculpting part of a courtier's robe today, intricate folds, embroidered coral beads, even the suggestion of leopard tooth trim. And it's not just for realism. The Oba's court loved metaphor. A carved fold could suggest humility, or deception, or the way power hides beneath cloth. It's sculpture as subtle poetry. Mainstream scholars agree. The Benin bronze casters were masters of wax modeling, creating forms so detailed that modern artists still marvel at the craftsmanship. Hairlines, jewelry, even the tight pattern of plaited braids, all shaped first in wax, not metal. That's the magic of lost wax casting. The bronze is always a translation of what your fingers said to the wax. Across the courtyard, someone sneezes. Loud. The wax head he's modeling gets an accidental smudge across the forehead, and he stares at it in horror. You can't help it, you laugh. The master doesn't. In the old days, he mutters, a sneeze meant the ancestors were listening. Be careful what you think near hot wax. Today's strange but true tale comes from one of the senior casters, who swears that a wax model once refused to melt during the burnout phase. He swears it. Sat there in the mold like a stubborn toad, he says, eyes wide. They took it as a sign the spirit inside wasn't ready. Or maybe just that they'd used too much beeswax from that one cranky hive near the shrine. Either way, it adds to your growing belief that wax has moods. You take a break around midday, your back groaning with gratitude as you stretch it out. You sit beside a junior apprentice who's been shaping a royal scepter's tip into a coiled python. He shows you his progress. It's impressively lifelike, each scale carefully pressed in with a fishbone comb. She's guarding something, he says quietly. Not sure what yet. That strikes a chord. So much of this process feels like guarding memory, power, secrets, stories. Even the wax seems to be hiding something. The conversation drifts, as it often does during tired afternoons, to the superstitions around wax casting. One boy insists that the wax can carry your thoughts. If you model something while thinking of someone, they'll dream of it that night. Another claims you should never model with your back facing west, or your spirit might melt out of you like wax in the sun. You try not to believe all of it, but you still turn east, just in case. As the day stretches on, your piece comes together. The folds of the robe lie convincingly, and you've embedded tiny bits of plant fiber into the wax to give texture to the edge of the headdress. The master inspects your work and nods once, then mutters, "Don't love the foot. Fix the foot." You sigh. Of course it's the foot. You spend another hour reshaping the toes of a courtier no one alive has ever met, and by the time it finally looks right, you feel like you've met him personally, and maybe owe him money. The wax figure now stands complete, glowing faintly in the fading light. You place it beside the others, ready for the next stage, coating in clay. But for now, they sit exposed, fragile, perfect, and temporary. That's what makes this so haunting. The wax is beautiful, but it's doomed. Everything you just made will be melted, burned, destroyed, just so its ghost can live forever in bronze. It's kind of like life, you think, except shinier. You can't help but lean in and whisper something to your wax figure. Just a little wish. A breath. Maybe the bronze will remember. Maybe not. You clean your hands with warm water and a cloth stained brown from 1,000 waxes before. Then you wrap the figure gently and carry it to the shaded drying table. It's quiet there, like a little mausoleum of soon-to-be immortals. Dinner comes with laughter and yam balls rolled in pepper. You eat slowly, watching the stars nudge their way across the sky. Someone starts humming a casting song. Others join in. You do too, but softly. The wax doesn't melt tonight, but your muscles do, into sleep, into dreams. You imagine the figure you made stretching its stiff wax joints and stepping into the darkness, testing its shape, its message, whispering your name in a language only bronze can speak. You wake with the birds again, not because you want to, but because someone's already hammering at the kiln dome like it owes them money. You groan, stretch, and immediately regret the motion. Your back still remembers yesterday's wax modeling. Every muscle complains in full paragraphs. Today is a new ordeal, the investment stage. No, not the kind with stocks or goats. This is where your beautiful wax figures, your art, your time, your tiny prayers, get smothered in layers of fine clay, then coarser clay, to prepare them for the fire. It's like wrapping your dreams in mud and hoping they survive the apocalypse. You shuffle to the courtyard, blinking against the dawn light. The master stands there already, arms folded, face unreadable. Several completed wax models rest on palm mats beside him, yours among them. Yours looks especially proud. Or maybe it's just the way the sunlight hits the headdress. He gestures silently, and the day begins. You start with the inner layer of fine clay, sieved and smoothed to a silky consistency. It goes on like paint, brushed on gently with a bundle of palm fibers bound in twine. This layer has to catch every detail of the wax, the folds, the beads, the smirk you added to the courtier's mouth when no one was looking. Miss a spot, and the molten bronze later will fill the gap with nothing. Just silence where detail should have been. Your fingers tremble slightly. It's not fear, exactly. It's reverence. Mainstream history tells us that the Benin bronze casters had a deep understanding of ceramic chemistry, long before terms like thermal expansion or porosity showed up in textbooks. They knew exactly how to layer clay, how to cure it with smoke, how to strengthen it with pulverized potsherds or charcoal ash. Their molds didn't just hold the bronze, they collaborated with it. Once the first layer dries, you repeat the process with thicker, grittier clay, building up layer by layer until the entire wax form is encased in a hard shell, like an earthy cocoon. You tap it gently with your knuckle. It rings, faint and hollow. It's ready, sort of. Now comes the fire. Or, more accurately, the waiting for fire, which is almost worse. The molds are arranged carefully in a pit kiln, mouths facing down, so the wax will flow out during heating. They look like a row of sleeping beasts, snouts buried in ash. You whisper goodbye to your figure. You know it's not coming back. At least not like this. As the fire's lit and smoke begins to curl, a senior caster tells a story. Because, well, what else do you do when watching clay glow for hours? It's about a cursed mold, of course. Apparently, during one rainy season decades ago, a caster rushed the drying phase. The mold looked solid but was still damp inside. When the fire hit it, it exploded, sent shards of clay flying across the courtyard, and nearly singed the Oba's cat. Since then, everyone treats mold drying like a sacred ritual. Because exploding art is still exploding. And here's today's strange morsel. One mold, shaped into the figure of a foreign dignitary with an oddly shaped hat, once refused to release its wax. The fire hissed, the shell steamed, but the wax inside stayed stubbornly intact. They eventually cracked it open to find no wax. Just a hollow. Like the figure had never existed at all. Some say the dignitary was a ghost to begin with. Others say someone swapped the mold out for fun. You decide to believe both versions. It's easier that way. As the kiln burns hotter, the wax begins to trickle from the mold mouths, flowing into channels dug in the ash bed. The smell is intense, sweet and thick, like burnt honey mixed with old shoes. You breathe through your sleeve, like everyone else. There's something poetic about it, though. The wax melts, but its memory stays locked in the clay. The pit glows red, then orange, then dull gray as it cools through the afternoon. You sit with the others, eyes half-lidded, drowsy with heat and satisfaction. The molds now contain cavities, perfect, delicate, invisible negatives of your wax forms. They're ready for bronze. Except, of course, they're not. First, they must rest. Breathe. Settle. That's what the master says anyway. You suspect he just wants dinner before pouring molten metal. So you retreat, sore and sooty, to the meal circle. Tonight it's jollof rice, and one of the older casters has managed to snag a roasted guinea fowl leg. He guards it like treasure. You settle for rice and fried plantain, which honestly might be the best thing you've ever tasted after a day full of smoke and stress. As stars prick the sky, you find yourself staring at the drying rack, at the row of hardened molds silhouetted against firelight. They look like sleeping heads, eyes closed, mouths sealed. You wonder, just for a moment, if they dream. You drift off imagining them whispering to one another, trading wax-born secrets. Yours says nothing. Just waits. There's a strange hush to the compound this morning. Not silence, exactly, no such thing here, but a focused quiet, like the whole place is holding its breath. The chickens are less obnoxious. The wind carries fewer jokes. Even the sun seems slower to rise, as if it too knows what's coming. Today is poor day. You dress carefully, your fingers stiff from sleep and nerves. Around you, the others are already preparing, clearing ash from the furnace mouth, inspecting crucibles, rubbing chalky clay onto their forearms to guard against splashes. Someone's muttering a prayer to Ogun under their breath, the god of iron and molten things. You follow suit, whispering your own offering, just in case he's feeling picky. In the center of it all stands the furnace, blackened and half-starved from the last pour. It snorts back to life with help from the bellows, great lungs of leather and wood, pressed rhythmically by foot or hand. You take your turn at the bellows, muscles aching with each push. The forge glows, then roars. Bronze begins to melt slowly. It looks wrong at first, lumpy, dull, stubborn. But gradually, the pieces soften into liquid light, flickering gold and orange with flashes of green. It's mesmerizing. Dangerous, but beautiful. You wonder if staring at molten bronze is what inspired so many stories about suns and gods and glowing blood. The crucibles are small but heavy, squat vessels that cradle the fire-born metal. You help load them with bits of bronze, old broken plaques, filings, leftover sprues. This is a foundry, not a landfill. Every scrap becomes something again. It's oddly comforting. Bronze reincarnates better than most people. Mainstream historians note that Benin's bronze was often an alloy of copper, tin, and sometimes zinc or lead, all imported through centuries of trade. Some of the bronze that made its way into royal sculptures came from melted-down manillas, horseshoe-shaped currency pieces traded by Europeans along the West African coast. So yes, somewhere in this crucible, some merchant's retirement plan is now becoming a courtier's cheekbone. When the metal finally melts to that perfect honey-fluid state, the master gives a curt nod. It's time. You hold your breath as the team lifts the crucibles with long iron tongs, moving like dancers in a ritual both sacred and terrifying. One wrong step, and someone loses a toe. Or worse, the molds are upright, mouths gaping open to the sky. You remember your wax figure, now just an echo inside hardened clay. No more details. No more corrections. It's in the hands of gravity now. The pour begins. Molten bronze flows in thick streams, hissing where it meets residual moisture. You can feel the heat on your face, even from a few feet away. The metal vanishes into the mold with a satisfied gulp, like it's returning home. One after another, each mold drinks its fill. There's no cheering. No applause. Just quiet efficiency. You move quickly, watching for leaks or cracks. One mold sputters a bit, spitting out a tiny puff of smoke. It holds. You exhale. And here's your oddball fact of the day. Some old casters used to place a tiny charm near the base of their molds before a pour. A shard of bone, a strip of cloth, a carved knot. Supposedly, it protected the figure's soul from melting wrong. Today, one of the older casters slips something into his mold just before the pour. You catch a glimpse. It's a tooth. Whose? No one asks? The molds are sealed with clay caps now, heat radiating from their sides. The bronze inside is trapped in complete darkness, shaping itself without eyes. You feel strangely proud, and deeply tired. You sit down hard on a bench, the adrenaline draining from your legs. Someone passes you water. You drink, then wipe your face on your sleeve. You're covered in clay dust, sweat, and something that might be joy. The cooling takes hours. Sometimes days, depending on the weather and the mold size. You know better than to rush it. Too fast, and the bronze will crack. Or worse, warp into something unrecognizable. That courtier's smirk could become a sneer. A hand could become a claw. Art doesn't forgive impatience. So you wait. As dusk slides in, the compound relaxes again. The tension lifts, replaced by the exhausted glow of a job well done. You play a lazy round of stones with an apprentice. He wins. You suspect he's been practicing. Over dinner, soft yam and groundnut stew, someone starts talking about failed pours. The kind that haunt a caster's dreams. There's one about a mold that, when broken open, revealed nothing inside. Just air. Another tells of a face poured in bronze that came out with closed eyes, even though the wax figure's eyes had been wide open. The master says nothing, just chews slowly and stares into the fire. As the stars rise, you sneak over to where your mold rests cooling. You press a hand gently to its side. It's still warm. Still solid. You think about the bronze inside, hardening into the shape you once held in wax. And here's the weirdest part, it feels alive. Not breathing. Not watching. But becoming. Later, in your sleeping mat, you drift off imagining the metal inside singing itself into form. The courtier's robe settling into drapes. The small bird on the shoulder tilting its head. The secret smirk sharpening like a blade. You don't know yet how it will turn out, but you dream it perfect. You arrive at the foundry before dawn on what feels like the final day of your apprenticeship's great cycle. The air is cool and heavy with lingering smoke, the scent of charcoal and damp clay settling into your bones. You move slowly, intentionally, every breath measured, every step tuned to the faint echo of a hammer's last ring. Today, you will witness the unveiling of the Oba's new bronze gallery, and in doing so, bid farewell to the rhythm that has been your heartbeat these past weeks. The compounds are quieter than usual. Apprentices tiptoe past the kills, mindful of cracked ears and brittle nerves. Even the cockerels abstain from crowing. You almost expect a hushed prayer to ripple across the courtyard, gently smoothing away any remaining clatter of tools. In the soft glow of lantern light, you glimpse the row of cooled molds standing sentinel like stoic sentries. Each represents a story you helped to shape, from the tiniest anklet to the sweeping curve of an elephant's trunk. A hush falls as the master caster steps forward, holding the first plaque by its edges. He taps it lightly against his palm, producing a quiet ping that seems to resonate in your chest. Mainstream history reminds you that each Benin bronze was not just sculpture but a hammered archive, images and symbols narrating royal lineage, conquests, and cosmic harmony. These plaques themselves are memory made solid. And today they will speak their truths in the Oba's Great Hall. The master instructs you to stand to one side as apprentices begin chipping away at the hardened clay shells. Soft cracks break the stillness, the sound like brittle autumn leaves underfoot. You feel your pulse quicken with every fragment that falls. When the first piece of bronze emerges, dusted in ash, you lean in. The relief of the Oba's crowned head glows faintly, his calm features framed by the same coral bead crown you first glimpsed in Section 4. You touch your fingertip to his cheek, careful not to mar the patina, and imagine his whisper, "It is done." One by one, the bronzes come free. The plaque of dancers, the warrior's stride, the tiny bird perched on the courtier's shoulder. You trained your hands on each of these forms. Seeing them now, you feel the weight of every late-night wax mold, every breath held during the pour. These bronzes are more than metal, they're sealed breaths and silenced hammers, waiting only for the light to set them singing again. You catch a glimpse of a lizard darting across the wall, its scales gleaming like polished bronze. Fringe lore held that these little guardians would slip into the gallery at night to inspect the new arrivals, ensuring no jealous spirit could steal the Oba's glory. You smile, picturing the tiny creature tapping its claws against the plaques, nodding approval. The clay dust drifts up as the final shells fall away. Apprentices use raffia brushes to clear residual ash, revealing the warm reddish gold sheen beneath. You take the brush in your hands and sweep along the elephant's flank, watching the metal brighten under your careful touch. The moment feels suspended, like a pause in the weaving of time. Then the Oba's herald appears at the gates, trumpet raised. You straighten, wiping your palms on a cloth stained by 1,000 tasks. The courtyard falls utterly silent, save for the distant drum, soft, ritual, beckoning you toward the palace. Before you join the procession, the master grips your shoulder and murmurs, "Historians still debate whether our rituals shape the metal or the metal shapes our rituals." You nod, understanding that this question has no answer, only the shared breath between craft and ceremony. You follow the line of casters and apprentices, each carrying a piece of the gallery toward the palace. The sun's first rays gild the plaques, making them shimmer with promise. When you cross the threshold of the hall, the air shifts, cool marble beneath your feet, the hush of reverent courtiers waiting. The bronzes are set in place with ritual precision. You lift the dancer plaque and clamp it against the polished wood, the coral beads catching the light like tiny embers. You step back, letting your eyes travel along the row of figures now illuminated in their new home. Each tells its silent story, each stands testament to a partnership of fire, earth, and human breath. A final gong sounds, and the Oba appears at the head of the hall. You catch his eye just as he surveys the array. He inclines his head once, no smile, no word, yet the room exhales in relief. You exhale too, feeling the release of a rhythm that's been your life and your teacher. Now, as you stand beneath the soft glow of evening lanterns in the Oba's hall, let your shoulders unfurl. The clang of hammers has faded, replaced by the gentle rustle of robes and the faint murmur of satisfied admiration. Feel the smooth weight of your own chest rising and falling. You've breathed heat, shaped wax, and carried molten memory in your hands. And now, it's time to rest. Let your senses soften, the muted glow of bronze patina, the faint scent of palm oil mingled with old clay, the warmth still radiating from each plaque's hidden chamber. Imagine the gallery as a vast, calm sea of metal, its surface rippling only when touched by light or breath. You are no longer racing fires or pouring bronze. You are simply here, a witness to the silent song your work will sing for generations. Allow your mind to drift over each moment you've lived in this forge, the steady rhythm of the bellows, the hiss of molten bronze, the sacred hush of clay shells cracking open. Let these memories settle like soft ash in the corners of your mind, comforting reminders that transformation can be both fierce and gentle. In the hush before sleep, recall the tap of a well-timed hammer, the precise glide of a carving tool, the secret hum of wax and spirit intertwined. Feel gratitude for each spark that flew and every bead you pressed into place, for these small acts have wrought stories in lasting metal. As you sink into sleep, imagine yourself suspended in a warm glow, drifting between molten gold and dark earth, cradled by the very bronze you helped bring to life. Let your last thoughts be of quiet assurance. The forge rests, the gallery watches, and you, artisan, storyteller, have earned your peace.